Here's a psychological truth that's going to completely change how you see your relationships. Toxic people don't just detect you, they train you, they program you, and the most disturbing part is they do it in a way that's so gradual, so systematic, that by the time you realize what's happening, you've been completely reconfigured to serve their needs. I'm not talking about obvious manipulation. I'm talking about a process of psychological conditioning so subtle, it feels like it's your own choice. Like you're the one choosing to stay, to tolerate, to give another chance. But it's not you. It's the program they installed. Psychologists call this progressive tolerance conditioning, and it works exactly like training an animal, except you're the animal, and you don't even know you're being trained. Stay with me because over the next 25 minutes, I'm going to dismantle the entire system. I'll show you the 5 exact phases of conditioning, the specific psychological techniques they use in each phase, and most importantly, how to deprogram yourself before it's too late. Because here's the truth you need to understand right now. If you've been in more than one toxic relationship, it's not coincidence. It's not bad luck. You don't have a curse. You've been systematically conditioned to accept unacceptable behavior, and there's a method behind that conditioning. Let's decode it together. Part 1. The selection process. Why they choose you before they can train you. They first have to find you, and contrary to what most people think, toxic people don't look for the weakest. They look for the most valuable. Let me explain why. Imagine you're a professional manipulator. Who would you want to invest your time and energy in? Someone who has nothing to offer, or someone who's empathetic, responsible, loyal, who has emotional resources, who cares deeply about people? Exactly. You'd look for someone worth manipulating. Here are the specific characteristics that make you a perfect target. First, you have high cognitive empathy. This means you can easily understand other people's perspectives. You can see why someone behaves a certain way. You can justify, rationalize, find explanations. This is a beautiful quality in healthy relationships. But for toxic people, it's a tool they can exploit. Because every time you understand their behavior, you give them a free pass. They're going through a hard time. Their childhood was rough. They're under a lot of stress. Your empathy becomes their shield. Second, you have what psychologists call relational optimism. You believe in people's potential. You believe in change. You believe that if you love someone enough, if you're patient enough, if you support them enough, they'll improve. This hope is fuel for manipulation. Because while you see potential, they see time. Time to consolidate control. Time to deepen dependency. Time to make you invest so much that leaving becomes impossible. Third, you have an overdeveloped sense of emotional responsibility. When something goes wrong in a relationship, your first instinct is to ask yourself, what did I do? How can I fix this? What can I do differently? This self-reflection is a sign of emotional maturity. But it also makes you vulnerable. Because while you question yourself, they never do. And in that asymmetric dynamic, you always end up being both the problem and the solution. They just have to exist. Fourth, you have difficulty processing cognitive dissonance. Your brain hates contradiction. When someone is charming on Monday and cruel on Wednesday, your mind desperately seeks a coherent narrative, so you create one. They're really a good person who just has bad days sometimes. Toxic people exploit this with a technique called intermittent reinforcement. They give you enough goodness to keep alive the story that they're good deep down, and you accept enough badness because you've already invested in that narrative. Fifth, you have soft boundaries by design, not by default. This is crucial. Your boundaries are soft not because you're weak, but because you were socialized to prioritize harmony over your needs. You were taught that good people adapt, that love means sacrifice, that being difficult is being problematic. Toxic people didn't create that programming, they just exploit it. So if you've ever wondered, why me? Now you know. They don't choose you despite your qualities. They choose you precisely because of them. And once they find you, the real process begins. Part 2. Conditioning, Phase 1. Strategic idealization. This is the phase that makes everything else work. And it's why you always say, but in the beginning, it was so perfect. Of course it was perfect by design. Psychologists call this love bombing, but that term doesn't capture the surgical precision of what's really happening. It's not just excessive love, it's a strategic investment in your reward system. Here's how it works. Neurologically. When someone gives you intense attention, constant affirmation, and makes you feel like the center of their universe, your brain releases a flood of dopamine and oxytocin. These are the same chemicals associated with addiction. Literally, your brain becomes addicted to how they make you feel. But here's the part most people don't understand. This isn't love, it's establishing a baseline. Think of it like a financial investment. They're depositing in your emotional bank now, so they can make massive withdrawals later. They're creating such a high reference point that you'll be willing to tolerate almost anything to get back to that feeling. Here's what they're really doing during this phase. First, they're mapping your needs system. Every time you talk about what's important to you, what you were missing in past relationships, what you value, they're taking mental notes. Not because they care, because they need to know exactly which levers to pull later. If you say, "In my last relationship, I never felt heard," guess what? They'll become the best listener you've ever met. For now. Second, they're subtly isolating you. Not in an obvious way. Not by saying, "I don't want you to see your friends." That would be too obvious. Instead, they make spending time together so incredible that you naturally want to be with them all the time. Your other relationships start to fade, not because they forbid it, but because your new relationship is so consuming, there's no room for anything else. And this is crucial. By the time you reach later phases and need external support, you'll have already lost touch with your support system. Third, they're creating premature shared identity. We're so alike. I've never met someone who understands me like this. It's like we're soulmates. This "we" language so early isn't intimacy. It's fusion, and fusion isn't love. It's the elimination of boundaries that protect you. Because once your identity is intertwined with theirs, defending yourself feels like betraying them. And that's exactly where they want you. Fourth, they're establishing a rescue pattern. During this phase, they create small dramas, small crises, small moments where they need your support. And you, being the empathetic and responsible person you are, show up. You rescue them. You support them. This does two things. It makes you feel needed, which feeds your self-worth, and it establishes the precedent that your role in this relationship is to be the giver, the caretaker, the fixer. Fifth, they're gradually desensitizing you. Here's where the real conditioning begins. They introduce small boundary violations, so small you overlook them. A slightly disrespectful comment disguised as a joke. A request that feels a bit unfair but not enough to fight over. A moment of selfishness you rationalize because nobody's perfect, and every time you let something small slide, they've moved the line a millimeter. You've accepted a new normal. This phase can last weeks or months, but eventually, inevitably, it moves to the next phase, and this is where the real damage begins. Part 3. Conditioning. Phase 2. Intermittent evaluation. If idealization is the investment, devaluation is the harvest, and they do this in such a calculated way that you'll blame yourself for the transition. Here's what makes this phase psychologically devastating. It's not an abrupt shift from good to bad. It's an unpredictable alternation between both, and that unpredictability is the key to the entire control system. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement, and it's the same technique that makes slot machines so addictive. You don't know when the reward is coming, so you keep playing, keep trying, keep investing. Here's what it looks like in a relationship. One day they're warm, attentive, like they used to be in the beginning. You feel relieved. You think, "There's the person I fell in love with. I knew they were still there." The next day, they're cold, critical, distant, and you're left confused, wondering what you did wrong. This alternation does something devastating to your psychology. It shifts your focus from, "Is this a good relationship?" to, "How can I make it like it was before?" You're no longer evaluating whether you should stay. You're trying to win back something you felt you already had. Here, are the specific techniques they use during this phase. First technique, criticism with plausible deniability. I'm just joking. You're too sensitive. You can't take constructive feedback. They say something hurtful, but frame it in a way that makes you feel the problem is your reaction, not their action. This creates what psychologists call reality violation. You know something felt wrong, but they tell you it wasn't wrong, so you start to doubt your own perception. Second technique, strategic withholding of affection. Remember all that attention and intimacy from the beginning. Now it's a faucet they can turn on and off at will, and they use it as a reward and punishment system. When you behave the way they want, when you don't complain, when you prioritize their needs, when you ignore your own boundaries, the faucet opens. When you stand up for yourself, the faucet closes. Your brain learns quickly. Conformity brings love. Boundaries bring abandonment. Third technique, emotional triangulation. They start mentioning other people in ways designed to make you feel insecure. My ex never had a problem with this. My coworker is so easy to talk to. My friend understands me better. They're not actually comparing you. They're creating competition where none should exist. And competition creates scarcity. Scarcity makes you try harder. Fourth technique, gaslighting your timeline. I never said that. You're remembering it wrong. That's not what happened. They deny things you know occurred, not because they forgot, because they're teaching you to distrust your own memory. Once you can't trust your own recall of events, you become dependent on their version of reality, and whoever controls the narrative controls the relationship. Fifth technique, mood unpredictability. You can't predict their emotional state from one moment to the next. They're happy, then suddenly irritable. They're loving, then suddenly withdrawn. And there's no clear trigger you can identify. This unpredictability keeps you in a constant state of hypervigilance. You're always scanning, always monitoring, always trying to manage their emotions. And that exhaustion makes you less able to recognize what's happening. Here's what's really going on in your brain during this phase. Your nervous system is being trained to associate your value with their approval. When they're warm, you feel worthy. When they're cold, you feel defective. You're literally becoming addicted to fixing whatever is wrong to get back to feeling valuable. And the intermittent nature of this makes it even more powerful. If they were consistently bad, you'd leave. If they were consistently good, they couldn't control you. But this unpredictable mix, it keeps you locked in, always hoping the next moment will be the good one. Before we move to the next phase, I need you to do something. If this is hitting home right now, if you're recognizing these patterns, take a breath. Leave a comment telling me which technique you've experienced most. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to finally see what's happening to them. And hit subscribe because we're about to go deeper into the psychology of how they solidify this control in Phase 3. Part 4. Conditioning. Phase 3. Creating learned helplessness. By Phase 3, something dangerous has happened. You've stopped trying to understand the relationship. You've started trying to survive it. This is where toxic people move from intermittent devaluation to something far more insidious. Learned helplessness. This is a documented psychological phenomenon where someone becomes so conditioned to negative outcomes that they stop trying to escape, even when escape becomes possible. It was first studied in the 1960s with dogs, and yes, I know that sounds harsh, but stay with me because understanding this will liberate you. In the experiment, dogs were put in situations where they received random shocks they couldn't avoid. Eventually, even when the barriers were removed and they could easily escape, they didn't. They had learned that their actions didn't matter. They just laid down and accepted it. This is what toxic people create in you. Not through physical pain, but through psychological conditioning that makes you believe resistance is futile. Here's how they engineer learned helplessness in relationships. First, they make the rules inconsistent. What was okay yesterday is a problem today. What made them angry last week makes them happy this week. There's no stable framework you can learn or adapt to. This inconsistency isn't confusion. It's strategy. Because when the rules constantly change, you can never be good enough. You can never figure out the right formula. You can never succeed. And after enough failed attempts to get it right, you stop trying to get it right. You just accept that you're always wrong. Second, they punish both action and inaction. If you bring up a problem, you're starting drama or being negative. If you don't bring up a problem, you're not communicating or being passive-aggressive. They've created a double bind where every choice leads to criticism. This teaches your brain that there's no right move. And when there's no right move, your executive function starts to shut down. You stop making decisions. You freeze. You wait to be told what to do. Third, they exhaust your decision-making capacity. They create constant small conflicts, constant minor decisions, constant emotional crises. Your brain has limited capacity for decision-making in a day, and they deliberately deplete it. By the time you need to make a big decision like whether to stay or leave, you have no cognitive resources left. So, you default to the path of least resistance, staying. Fourth, they rewrite your success stories. When something good happens in your life, they find a way to diminish it. Anyone could have done that. You were just lucky. It's not that big of a deal. When something bad happens, they amplify your responsibility. I told you so. You never listen. This is exactly what I expected from you. Over time, you internalize a narrative where your successes are flukes and your failures are character flaws. This destroys your sense of agency, and without agency, you can't leave. Fifth, they create financial, social, or practical dependencies. Maybe they convince you to quit your job because we don't need the money or you're too stressed. Maybe they create drama with your friends until it's easier to not see them. Maybe they move you somewhere, isolated in. Maybe they get you to make joint purchases that would be costly to undo. These aren't random events. They're strategic moves to increase the cost of leaving until it feels impossible. Here's what learned helplessness looks like from the inside. You think, I can't leave because... And then you list practical reasons. But those practical reasons are symptoms, not causes. The real reason you can't leave is that you've been systematically taught that your actions don't change outcomes. You've tried being better, being quieter, being more supportive, being more independent, being more communicative, being less needy, and nothing worked consistently. So your brain concluded, it's not about what I do. It's about who I am, and I can't escape who I am. That's the trap. And it's by design. But here's what you need to understand. Learned helplessness isn't a permanent condition. It's a reversible psychological state. The moment you see the mechanism, you begin to break free from it. Part 5. Conditioning Phase. Verbeerdprojects, Isolation and Identity Erosion. By Phase 4, toxic people have done something extraordinary. They've made you smaller, not physically, but psychologically, emotionally, socially, spiritually. The person you were when you met them had dreams, opinions, friendships, hobbies, boundaries, standards. The person you are now has systematically let go of pieces of yourself to maintain peace in the relationship. And here's the terrifying part. You probably didn't notice it happening. This is what psychologists call identity erosion, and it's the phase that makes leaving feel impossible, because by this point, you're not just afraid of losing them, you're afraid you've lost yourself. Let me show you how this works. First, they've replaced your internal compass with their approval. You used to know what you liked, what you believed, what you wanted. Now, before you have an opinion about anything, you check. What would they think? What would they want? What would keep the peace? Their preferences have become your preferences. Their worldview has become your worldview, not because they forced it on you overtly, but because the cost of disagreeing was always higher than the cost of conforming. Second, they've made you afraid of your own thoughts. You have thoughts you don't share, doubts you don't voice, feelings you suppress before they fully form. Because you've learned that your authentic reactions are always wrong in some way. Too sensitive, too dramatic, too needy, too demanding, too much. So you've become an internal editor, constantly censoring yourself before you even finish a thought. And when you can't trust your own thoughts, you can't trust yourself to make decisions. Third, they've disconnected you from your support system. Maybe your friends don't call anymore. Maybe your family says we never see you. Maybe you've drifted from the activities and communities that used to define you. This didn't happen by accident. It happened through 1,000 tiny discouragements. Do you really need to go? I thought we were spending today together. I don't feel comfortable when you're out without me. Your friends don't really get you like I do. And now, when you need perspective most, you have no one to provide it. You're alone with their version of reality. Fourth, they've made you defend them to others. When someone in your life expresses concern about your relationship, your first instinct is to defend your partner, to explain, to justify, to minimize. Not because you believe it, but because admitting the truth to someone else would make it too real. As long as you keep defending them to others, you can keep lying to yourself. This is called cognitive commitment. The more you publicly defend a decision, the harder it becomes to reverse it. Toxic people know this. That's why they create situations where you're constantly explaining or defending them. Fifth, they've created a new definition of normal. You've accepted behavior you never would have tolerated before. Things that would have been deal breakers in the beginning are now just how things are. You've normalized the chaos, the criticism, the coldness, the control, and you've done it so gradually that you can't even remember when it changed. This is the most dangerous part of identity erosion. You've become someone you don't recognize, but the change was so gradual, you can't pinpoint when you lost yourself. Here's what this looks like, practically. Someone asks you a simple question. What do you want to do this weekend? And you freeze. Because you genuinely don't know. You've spent so long managing their needs that your own desires have atrophied. Or someone pays you a compliment, and instead of feeling good, you feel anxious. Because you've been so conditioned to criticism that positive feedback feels unstable, temporary, like it's about to be withdrawn. Or you have a moment of happiness, and your first thought is, how long will this last? When will the other shoe drop? Because you've been trained to expect that good moments are just setups for bad ones. This is what it means to have lost yourself, and toxic people need you to lose yourself, because a person with a strong sense of identity has boundaries, has standards, has the ability to leave. A person without identity is malleable, controllable, trapped. Part 6. Conditioning. Phase 5. The final trap. Now we arrive at the final phase, and this is where toxic people seal the deal. This is where they take everything they built and turn it into a prison you can't escape, even when the door is wide open. Psychologists call this trauma bonding, but that term doesn't quite capture what's really happening. It's not just a bond formed through trauma. It's a complete rewiring of your attachment system. Here's the mechanism. Your brain is designed to attach to caregivers who meet your needs. But what happens when the person who hurts you is also the person who comforts you afterward? When the source of your pain is also the source of your relief, your brain gets confused. It can't properly categorize this person as dangerous because they're also your source of safety. So it creates an incredibly strong attachment, stronger than normal healthy attachments, because your nervous system is constantly trying to resolve this paradox. This is why you can't just leave, even when you know you should. It's not weakness, it's neurobiology. Here's how toxic people engineer this final phase. First, they create a cycle of rupture and repair. They hurt you, then love-bomb you just enough to stop the pain. They create the wound and then offer themselves as the medicine. And your brain learns the only way to stop hurting is to get them to be nice again. This creates an addiction loop. You're not addicted to them. You're addicted to the relief of no longer being hurt by them. Second, they make leaving more painful than staying. They've structured your life so that leaving would mean losing your home, your financial stability, your social circle, your routine, your identity, your hope for the future. The short-term pain of leaving feels unbearable, even though the long-term pain of staying will destroy you. Third, they've taught you that your pain is your fault. By this point, You've internalized their narrative. If you're unhappy, it's because you're not trying hard enough. If they're cruel, it's because you provoked them. If the relationship is failing, it's because you're failing. This self-blame serves a function. It gives you a false sense of control, because if it's your fault, then you can fix it. If it's their fault, you're helpless. So, your brain chooses the illusion of control through self-blame over the reality of powerlessness. Fourth, they've made you believe you can't function without them. No one else would put up with you. You'll never find someone who loves you like I do. You need me. These aren't expressions of love. They're installations of fear. And if they've said it enough times, you've started to believe it. The thought of being alone terrifies you, not because being alone is inherently scary, but because they've convinced you that you're not capable of it. Fifth, they dangle hope. This is the cruelest part. They give you just enough good moments, just enough glimpses of who they were in the beginning, just enough promise of change to keep you believing that if you just hold on a little longer, it will get better. Hope is the rope they use to keep you tied to them, and they're experts at deploying it right when you're about to break free. Deprogramming. How to break free. Now here's what you need to understand. Everything I just described is reversible. All of it. The conditioning, the learned helplessness, the identity erosion, the trauma bond. These are all psychological states that can be interrupted and reversed. But you have to understand the deprogramming process. Here's how you begin. Step 1. Name the pattern. You can't break free from something you can't see. The fact that you've made it this far in this video means you're starting to see it. That awareness is the first crack in the program. Write down the 5 phases I described. Then write down specific examples from your relationship that match each phase. Make it concrete. Make it undeniable. Step 2. Reclaim your perception. They've taught you to doubt yourself, to question your reactions, to wonder if you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. Here's a new rule. If it feels wrong, it is wrong. Your emotional reactions are data. They're not flaws in your character. They're your nervous system telling you something is off. Start a private journal where you record things that bother you without editing or justifying. Just facts. They said X, I felt Y. No analysis, no rationalization, just observation. Step 3. Rebuild your external reality check. You need people who knew you before this. Relationship. People who can reflect back to you who you really are. People who aren't invested in you staying. Reach out to one person you've drifted from. You don't have to explain everything. Just reconnect. Let their version of you remind you that other versions exist. Step 4. Create a safety plan. Leaving isn't always immediate. Sometimes it requires planning, financial planning, logistical planning, emotional planning. But start planning. Even if you don't execute it yet, the act of planning returns agency to you. It reminds you that you have options, that you have power. Step 5. Interrupt the reinforcement cycle. Every time you accept unacceptable behavior, you strengthen the conditioning. So start with tiny interruptions. The next time they say something hurtful disguised as a joke, don't laugh, don't smile. Just say, "That hurt my feelings." You don't need to start a fight. You don't need a 3-hour conversation. You just need to stop rewarding bad behavior with your compliance. Step 6. Reconnect with your before self. Who were you before this relationship? What did you like? What did you believe? What did you dream about? Find one thing from your before life and bring it back. A hobby, a friend, a routine, a value. Start small, but start. Step 7. Get professional support. Deprogramming from this level of conditioning is hard to do alone. A therapist who understands trauma bonding and psychological manipulation can accelerate your healing immensely. If you can't afford therapy, there are support groups, online communities, resources. You're not alone in this. Step 8. Accept that leaving will hurt. Here's the truth no one wants to tell you. Leaving will be painful. Not because it's wrong, but because you've been bonded to this person through intense psychological conditioning. You will miss them. You will doubt yourself. You will want to go back. That's normal. That's the program running. It doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. The pain of leaving is temporary. The pain of staying is permanent. Step 9. Prepare for escalation. When you start setting boundaries, when you start reclaiming yourself, they will escalate. They'll be extra nice, or extra cruel, or both, alternating rapidly. This is called an extinction burst. It's a last-ditch effort to reassert control. If you expect it, you won't be derailed by it. Step 10. Build a new definition of love. Real love doesn't require you to shrink. Real love doesn't make you doubt yourself. Real love doesn't drain you dry. Real love feels like coming home to yourself, not losing yourself. Real love is consistent, not intermittent. Real love respects boundaries, not violates them. Start learning what healthy love looks like so you can recognize it when it arrives. Here's what I want you to take away from this. You are not broken. You are not cursed. You are not a magnet for toxic people because there's something wrong with you. You are targeted because there's something right with you. Your empathy, your loyalty, your capacity for love, your willingness to see the best in people. Those are beautiful qualities, but without boundaries, they become vulnerabilities that toxic people exploit. The good news is this. Once you understand the program, you can deprogram yourself. Once you see the pattern, you can break it. Once you know the game, you can stop playing. It won't be easy. It won't be quick, but it is absolutely possible. And on the other side of this conditioning is a version of you that you've forgotten exists. A version that's whole, that's strong, that's free, that knows their worth and doesn't negotiate it. That person is still in there. They've just been buried under layers of conditioning, and every boundary you set, every time you trust your perception, every moment you choose yourself, you're excavating them. So start today. Start small, but start because you deserve relationships that add to your life, not subtract from it. You deserve love that builds you up, not tears you down. You deserve to feel safe, respected, valued, and free. And the only person who can give you that life is you. If this video helped you see something you've been missing, do 2 things. Subscribe to this channel because we go deep into psychology, relationships, self-awareness, and personal power every week. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is show them the pattern they can't see yet. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.